His wife said, "Don't cry now. You'll need those tears when I take your pride and half of your empire." What he did next shattered her dreams. "Don't cry now, Cole. You'll need those tears when I take your pride and half of your empire." Those were the last words Jenna Hunter said to her husband before sliding the divorce papers across the table, her confidence filling the room like perfume. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her had already engineered the most brilliant financial trap in divorce court history. What unfolded next would expose lies, loyalty, and justice in ways no one expected. Viewers, how would you handle betrayal from someone who smiled while planning your downfall? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Cole Hunter's mornings began before the sun reached the lake. The house still carried the hush of sleep, that soft in-between quiet when the world holds its breath. He liked that hour best, when the water outside the wide glass wall looked like slate, and the air inside the house smelled faintly of cedar and last night's rain. Most days he rose without an alarm, poured black coffee into the same stoneware mug, and stood by the window watching the first shimmer of light slide across the surface of the water. It was the ritual of a man who had everything he'd once wanted, and very little he didn't. Success had given him comfort, space, and quiet. The kind of quiet that felt earned, not lonely. He had built a company from the dirt up, steel, contracts, and patience, and then built a home sturdy enough to hold the life he shared with Jenna. She filled that home the way sunlight fills a room, effortlessly as if brightness were her birthright. She came down the stairs each morning with the grace of someone who had learned early that attention followed beauty. Her hair still damp from the shower, robe cinched, bare feet silent on the polished oak. She carried the scent of citrus and something floral that never quite left the rooms she passed through. Cole turned from the window when he heard her. "Coffee's ready," he said, his voice low from sleep. "I can smell it," she answered, smiling as she crossed to him. She reached for the cup before he could, her fingers brushing his. "You always remember." He smiled. "Some things I get right." She leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. Morning light found her through the glass wall, striking the thin gold band on her wrist. In that light she looked both delicate and untouchable, as though she existed a step above the ordinary world. They spoke easily, of nothing that mattered much. Her schedule for the day, his meetings downtown, the charity luncheon she'd been planning for weeks. When she mentioned it, her voice shifted slightly, warmer, the way it did whenever she talked about the foundation. He liked that tone. It reminded him of the first years, when she'd been driven by conviction rather than attention. "The new therapy center's almost ready," she said. "Ryan thinks we can announce the opening date next month." He nodded. "That soon?" He's efficient." She smiled into her cup. "You picked the right man to help run it." Cole said nothing. Ryan Pierce had been his friend long before the foundation, before the house, before Jenna. It pleased him that they worked well together. It kept the world neat, familiar. Jenna set her cup down and turned to the window. "Look at that," she murmured. The morning had cleared. Mist lifted off the water like breath. "Sometimes I forget how beautiful it is here." "That's because you never stop moving long enough to see it." She glanced back at him, teasing. "And you'd never move if I didn't make you." He smiled, and the smile felt real. For a few quiet minutes, they simply stood there, the kind of stillness that comes only when two people believe the world outside their walls is steady. When she left for her meetings, the house stayed warm with the echo of her perfume and the faint trail of her voice giving instructions to someone on the phone. Cole gathered his notes, locked the sliding door to the patio, and paused before leaving. On the table near the door sat a framed photograph from their wedding, the wind catching her veil, his hand on her waist, both of them laughing into sunlight. He studied it for a moment, then straightened the frame and turned off the lights. The day stretched ahead, ordinary and full. He stepped outside, the air crisp against his face, and thought, not for the first time, that contentment was the rarest luxury of all, and for now, he had it. The afternoon slipped away without noise. Sunlight crossed the study, slow and sure, and by early evening the house was washed in that amber stillness that came before rain. Cole parked in the drive later than usual, the smell of warm asphalt rising under the tires, and stepped inside to the quiet rhythm of the grandfather clock in the hallway. He called out for Jenna but heard only the muted hum of her playlist upstairs. Somewhere above, water was running. She was getting ready for the gala dinner the foundation hosted every spring. He loosened his tie, hung his jacket on the chair, and went to the kitchen. The table was half set, silver polished, linen folded, and a vase of lilies waited in the center, their scent sharp enough to fill the air. A storm had gathered over the lake, dark clouds rolling like slow smoke. Thunder grumbled in the distance, the kind that promises more sound than rain. He stood by the window, watching the reflection of the water flicker against the glass. Behind him something buzzed once, soft and short. Her phone lay on the counter, screen face down. Another buzz. He turned toward it without thinking, meaning only to move it away from the edge, but the light came on as he reached for it. A message preview filled the screen. Clear, casual, impossible. Babe, we've made enough from the kids' fund. It's time to hit him hard. For a long breath, everything around him held still. The sound of the rain beginning, the hiss of the refrigerator, even the slow ticking clock, every ordinary thing stretched thin until it didn't feel ordinary at all. He pulled out his own phone, turned the brightness down, lifted hers again, took one clear photograph of the screen, and sent it to his private email. He set the phone back exactly where it had been, as though misplacing it might change what he'd read. His hand stayed open on the counter. He felt the grain of the wood under his fingertips, rough where the polish had worn. The water upstairs stopped. The faint click of a door latch followed, then the slide of hangers. "Is that you, Cole?" Her voice floated down, light, distracted. "I'm downstairs," he answered. His tone sounded almost normal. She appeared a moment later, fastening an earring. The dress, charcoal silk, the one she wore for press dinners, moved like smoke when she walked. "You're home early," she said. "Flights canceled, weather in Dallas. That's lucky. You can come tonight." He nodded, eyes on the curve of her hand adjusting her necklace. The gold chain caught the overhead light. The stones at her throat looked cold. "You okay?" she asked. "Tired," he said. "You work too hard." She smiled, reached up to smooth the edge of his collar, the gesture practiced, affectionate, effortless. Her nails grazed the fabric near his throat. "You should change. The driver will be here soon." He looked at her the way one looks at a stranger who happens to share a familiar face. "You go ahead. I'll follow. Don't be late, Cole. The photographers love a united front." She kissed him lightly, a brief press of perfume and lipstick. When she stepped back, her eyes flicked past him to the table. "You didn't touch dinner." "Wasn't hungry." "Then at least have a drink." "I might." She checked her phone, frowning slightly. "Ryan's already at the hotel. I'll text you when we're seated." He watched her gather her bag, the small details, keys, compact, phone sliding neatly into its place. The same phone that held the message. The door closed behind her, leaving the faint echo of her heels on the stone walkway. Rain tapped harder against the windows. The scent of lilies had deepened, sweet to the point of ache. Cole poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass and stood by the window again, watching her car pull away through the storm. The lightning came late, white and clean, cracking across the lake. For an instant it lit her taillights as they disappeared into the dark road beyond the trees. He didn't move. The glass warmed in his hand. Somewhere in the distance thunder rolled again and the sound seemed to fold the night closed around him. Upstairs her laughter still lingered faintly in the air, a ghost left behind by routine. He looked at the reflection of the empty room in the window and for the first time, it didn't look like home. The rain had turned to mist by dawn. A gray film clung to the windows, softening the outline of the lake until the water and sky became the same color. Cole sat at the kitchen table, the lamp above him burning weak and yellow, a half-finished glass of whiskey beside a ring of condensation. The phone lay flat in front of him. He hadn't moved in hours. When the clock in the hallway struck 6, he rose, washed the glass, and dressed for the office. The habit steadied him. The roads were slick, the city still half asleep, headlights sliding through the fog like slow-moving stars. Harold Stone looked surprised when Cole appeared in his doorway before business hours, but he said nothing, only motioned toward the chair opposite his desk. Cole sat, opened his phone, scrolled once, and held it out. The message glowed on the screen like a cut that hadn't scabbed over. "I want everything checked," he said quietly. "Every account, every invoice." Harold nodded once. "It stays between us." Days folded into each other. Accountants moved in silence, combing through ledgers and bank feeds. Spreadsheets arrived marked in red, columns filled with transactions that led nowhere real. Money meant for the Foundation's programs had bled into a consulting firm, with Ryan's name on its registration. There were transfers labeled equipment grants that matched the price of hotel suites in Chicago and Miami. Cole read each report without comment, the lines blurring into a single thought that hardened at the back of his throat. He didn't confront her. He didn't change anything. He wanted her to reveal herself, to believe the stage was still hers. The house stayed quiet, but the air inside it changed. A silence with texture now, heavy and waiting. He played the part she expected, the tired husband, the man losing interest. And she played hers so well that sometimes, in the softer hours of evening, he almost believed nothing had changed at all. 3 weeks later, the sky turned the same color as the lake before rain, flat and metallic, and she called him to dinner with the same voice she used in better years. He joined her at the table, the scent of lemon butter and thyme rising from the plates, a bottle of wine already open between them. The meal should have been pleasant, the kind that fills a room with small talk and ordinary comfort. But she barely touched her food, her fingers tracing idle circles along the rim of her glass. "I can't do this anymore," she said. The tone wasn't angry. It was deliberate, stripped of apology. He looked up, the knife pausing in midair. "Do what?" "Pretend," she said. "Pretend we're fine. Pretend we want the same things." She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she'd carried for too long. "I've been miserable for years, Cole." He set the knife down carefully, eyes steady on hers. "Then tell me what I did wrong." She pressed the napkin to her lips, then folded it beside the plate. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being enough." For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind shifted outside, bending the flame between them until the shadows on her face wavered. "You built an empire," she continued, voice quieter now. "But I built the life around it. I kept the world believing in you. I gave you a name that sounded like a dream." His voice stayed calm. "So that's what this is about. Image." "It's about truth," she said. "I don't love you anymore." The words didn't cut the way she might have hoped. They fell into the air and stayed there, thin and final. She reached into her bag and slid an envelope across the table. Its edges caught the light. "These are from my lawyer. I've already signed." He didn't touch it at first. His gaze drifted to her hands. Steady, polished, practiced. And then to her face, still beautiful in the careful way power often is. He picked up the envelope, weighed it in his palm. "You've thought this through." "I have." "Don't cry now," she said softly, echoing the line as if rehearsed. "You'll need those tears when I take your pride and half your empire." He gave a slow nod. No anger in it, only fatigue. "Then I guess this is business." "Everything is," she said. She rose, adjusting the collar of her coat, her perfume cutting through the smell of rain. "You'll hear from my lawyer. I've signed my part." He nodded once. "And I'll sign mine." When the door closed behind her, the house seemed to shrink into itself. He sat at the table a long time, listening to the slow hiss of rain beginning again against the windows. Then he opened the envelope. The papers were flawless. No hesitation in her signature, no sign of remorse. He took the pen from the drawer, turned the page, and signed his name beneath hers with a line that neither trembled nor paused. The next morning he drove to Harold's office, the sky bruised with early clouds. He handed over the documents and stood by the window while Harold reviewed them. The lawyer spoke quietly, explaining how they will crush her in the courtroom. Cole didn't answer. His reflection in the glass looked like another man entirely, one who had already made peace with the storm waiting to break. When he left the office, the first drops of rain had begun to fall again, light but certain, like punctuation at the end of a sentence no one needed to read aloud. A month later, winter had loosened its grip on the city. The trees along Jefferson Square were pale with the first blush of green, the kind that comes before spring fully believes in itself. The courthouse loomed at the end of the block, tall and pale against the washed sky, its stone steps still dark from the morning dew. Cole arrived early, walking with the measured calm of a man who had already made peace with whatever might come. His breath showed faintly in the cool air. The day promised sun but hadn't delivered it yet. Harold met him at the entrance, coat buttoned, papers under his arm. "Everything's ready," he said, his tone low but steady. Cole nodded once. He didn't need reassurance. He had spent the last 4 weeks preparing in silence, meetings with auditors, sealed evidence packets, signatures that would never tremble again. Inside, the courtroom was brighter than he expected. Sunlight pooled across the polished floor, reflecting off brass fixtures and the glossed wood of the benches. Jenna was already seated at her table, posture perfect, the faintest hint of a smile holding her features together. She wore a pale blue suit, understated but sharp, and a string of pearls that caught the light with each small movement. Ryan sat behind her, face drawn, tie knotted too tightly at the throat. The judge entered, her robe whispering against the floor, her presence commanding without effort. The murmur in the gallery faded into the hum of fluorescent lights. Jenna's lawyer rose first. His voice carried the smooth cadence of someone who'd spent years selling a version of truth that sounded noble. He spoke of contribution, devotion, sacrifice. He painted Jenna as the invisible force behind her husband's empire, the woman whose charm had softened his edges, whose presence had turned a business into a brand. Harold didn't interrupt. He waited, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes lowered in patience. When the last sentence fell, Harold stood, unfolded a single document, and stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, voice clear and steady, "before any discussion of division, the ownership of assets must be defined." He offered the clerk a sealed folder. All corporate shares, patents, real estate, and financial interests were placed in an irrevocable trust fund 3 years before Mr. Hunter's marriage. These assets are therefore non-marital and exempt from equitable distribution under state law. The judge adjusted her glasses. "This trust was verified?" "Yes, Your Honor. Certification records and witness affidavits are enclosed." A quiet ripple moved through the room. Lawyers whispering, pens pausing. Jenna's lawyer inhaled sharply, regaining balance. "The foundation, however, was created during the marriage and is a joint enterprise. My client is therefore entitled to half of its holdings." Harold nodded slightly. "That brings us to the second matter." He reached for a larger binder, its edges marked with yellow tabs. "A forensic audit, commissioned independently by the board, has confirmed multiple unauthorized transfers from the foundation's account to a private consultancy registered under Mr. Ryan Pierce's name." The judge's gaze shifted to Ryan. "Is that true, Mr. Pierce?" Ryan's throat worked once before he spoke. "The transactions were approved by Mrs. Hunter." Harold continued without pause. Each transfer was documented with Mrs. Hunter's digital signature. In addition, attached text communications between Mrs. Hunter and Mr. Pierce explicitly reference these diversions. One message reads, and I quote, "We've made enough from the kids' fund, it's time to hit him hard." A sound broke the still air, a chair leg scraping the floor as Jenna half rose before catching herself. Her lawyer tugged her sleeve, whispering something urgent, but the color had already drained from her face. The judge leaned back slowly. "Mrs. Hunter, do you wish to respond to these findings?" Jenna's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted toward Ryan, whose own expression had gone rigid, guilt etched into every line of his face. The judge exhaled, removed her glasses, and spoke quietly, but firmly. "This court finds no legal basis for any claim over trust assets. Furthermore, given the presented evidence, the court refers the matter of financial misconduct to the district attorney's office for investigation. The divorce is granted. All accounts tied to the foundation are to remain frozen pending criminal review." The gavel struck once. The sound rippled through the chamber like a final breath. Jenna lowered herself back into her chair, staring at the floor. The quiet around her was the kind that leaves no space for pride. Ryan didn't move at all. Cole rose, gathered his papers, and nodded to Harold. As he walked down the aisle, light poured through the high windows, falling across his face like a blessing he didn't ask for. Outside, the sky had cleared completely. No rain, no storm, only the calm that comes when truth has finally spoken for itself. 2 weeks later, the city woke to the sound of sirens somewhere far away, and the first heat of May pressing against its windows. The news had broken before sunrise. Hunter Foundation fraud case to reach sentencing today. By the time Cole stepped out of his car on the courthouse steps, the crowd had already gathered. Flashes burst against the morning light, voices blending into a low human hum that rose and fell like waves. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than before, as if the walls had drawn closer to contain what was left of the story. The air smelled of paper and polish, and something tense. Across the aisle, Jenna and Ryan were led in by officers. Gone were the designer suits. They wore plain county gray, wrists lightly cuffed before them. Even under fluorescent light, the difference between the woman who once commanded a room and the one standing there now was painfully visible. Ryan kept his eyes down, his face chalk white. Jenna's chin lifted in the old way, but her hands trembled against the metal. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When they sat again, the sound of paper echoed as the clerk arranged the files. The judge's voice came steady. Each word weighed. "After review of forensic records, financial transfers, and electronic communications, this court finds the defendants guilty of misappropriation of charitable funds, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The total sum diverted was $2,384,000. All associated accounts have been frozen pending restitution." A soft cry escaped someone in the gallery. The judge continued. "The court sentences Mrs. Jenna Hunter and Mr. Ryan Pierce each to 15 years in state custody without eligibility for parole. Restitution of the full amount is ordered jointly and severally." Jenna rose so suddenly the chair behind her skidded. "Please, please don't do this," she said, her voice cracking. "I did it for him. He said it was temporary. I can pay it back, every cent, please, Your Honor." The judge did not look up from the file. The record speaks for itself. Ryan started to say something, but his lawyer gripped his arm. The bailiffs moved in. Jenna twisted toward Cole, her voice breaking through the quiet. "Cole, please, say something. Tell them I'm not a monster." He stood but did not speak. His eyes met hers, steady and tired. There was nothing left to defend, nothing to hate. Only the truth sitting between them like a wall made of glass. The officers took her by the arms. Her heels caught on the edge of the floor mat. She stumbled once, then straightened, head tilted high again as they led her through the side door. Ryan followed, face empty, steps slow. The door closed behind them with a soft final thud that seemed to remove all the air from the room. The judge set her pen down. "Court is adjourned." Cole watched the seal on the wall above the bench catch the light. For a moment, he stood there without moving, hearing only the shuffle of feet and the creak of wood as people filed out. Then he turned and walked slowly toward the exit. Outside, the air was hot and sharp. Sunlight hit the marble steps, flaring white. Reporters called his name again, their voices thin under the buzz of news drones hovering above the street. He didn't answer. He kept moving down the stairs, one hand on the rail, the other loosely at his side. Halfway down, he paused and looked back. Through the glass doors, he could see the corridor beyond the courtroom, the officers, the shadows of the two figures being led away. For a moment, their silhouettes blurred into the bright rectangle of sunlight spilling from a window at the end of the hall. Then they were gone. He turned toward the street, the noise of the city rising to meet him. Horns, footsteps, the distant roll of a train. Every sound belonged to the present again, not the past. Harold fell into step beside him, but said nothing. At the curb, Cole stopped, the sun bright on his face. He took a breath deep enough to fill his lungs and let it go slowly, as if releasing everything that had kept him anchored to that long, dark year. When the car door closed behind him and the city began to slide past the window, he didn't look back again. The courthouse faded in the rear mirror, its columns catching the sun until they looked almost gold. And for the first time since it all began, the silence around him felt not like loss, but like freedom. When love turns into greed, someone always pays the price. If you were in Cole's shoes, would you have walked away quietly, or let them face the full weight of karma? Let's talk in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.